The U.S. president possibly working for the Russians, possibly an unwitting pawn.
Now, here's what the president said when asked if he was a secret Russian agent.
Donald Trump knows the noose is tightening.
The noose is tightening.
The noose is tightening, if you will.
The noose is tightening around the president.
The noose is tightening. And I think they're shocked that the noose is tightening and that people might go to jail.
He knows he and POTUS are going to prison.
Well, I think they're all going to end up together in prison, and maybe that's a good thing.
God.
The noose is tightening. Joining me now, my friend Curtis Houck, managing editor of the Media Research Center. Curtis, let me ask you something. Did Trump's presidency break the media or expose the media?
It exposed the media. I think, Jesse, it's one of those things where, like, you're sick and, you know, the media were sick well before that. We saw that through the Obama years, in previous administrations as well, going back to even Ronald Reagan when the MRC was founded in 1987. But really, I think it took Donald Trump to really show that, expose that for the wider masses. It's like an ailment that if you know your body really well, or you're a fitness or health junkie, you might notice certain things, whereas, you know, a normal layperson might not until things have really progressed. So it's very similar to that, where the news media in the Trump era just became completely deranged. You know, yes, people's brains were broken, but a lot of people were already on the precipice, and that just kind of sent them careening over the edge instead of slowly falling off the side.
Why? What was it about Trump? Now, I realize he's a strong personality. I get it. He's bombastic and charismatic and wild and did things different, but I find it so odd how many people he pushed over the edge, as you just put it. Why?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of reasons. One, yes, he was bombastic. Two, he used to be part of them. He used to be a, you know, New York City liberal who gave money and went to the same fundraisers and went to the same parties as they did in New York. And they didn't like that they beat them at their own game. The other part is that he was made famous in large part due to The Apprentice, something on NBC, big bad NBC News, created by Jeff Zucker, CNN, former CNN boss. And I think the other point was that when they looked at the field, the 2016 field, well over a dozen candidates, they wanted Donald Trump. Joe and Mika saddled up to Donald Trump. They shacked up with Donald Trump. They promoted him, you know, to the point that it just seemed creepy. CNN had empty podium shots because they thought that this is the guy that will beat Hillary Clinton because we don't know who he is, and he's just so unhinged. And then it backfired on them. So it not only backfired, Trump would routinely rub it in their faces and pile drive them into the ground and be able to just see through when he was being insulted. You saw that often in previous years with George W. Bush and his folks in his administration. The media would say horrible things about them, and they would just try and think killing them with kindness would really do the trick. And really, the media aren't playing for keeps, and they still aren't playing for keeps. They're a reflection of the wider left in this country. And so I think Trump not only identified that, said, no, we're not going to play that game anymore. I'm going to throw it back in your face. And with his press secretaries, particularly Sarah Sanders and Kayleigh McEnany, you know, bring facts to the table and make actual coherent arguments in addition to the bombast as well. So that potent combination was something that was just way too much for those people to understand. They're still grappling with that to this day.
Curtis, Jim Acosta and those like him. Actually, this little clip, I think, exposes a lot of what I want to ask.
They're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an
you
invasion.
Should, honestly, you know what?
Away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings
Let
would
me
be
ask,
much better.
if I may ask one other question, Mr. President. I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic. I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter, go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his
Well,
butt
I'm not a
like the
big
rest
fan
of
of
us.
yours either, so
I understand.
to be honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can. You repeatedly said...
You aren't the best.
Mr. President, you repeatedly, over the course of
Okay,
the...
just sit down, please. Well, when you report fake news, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people.
Okay, Curtis, Jim Acosta, everyone remembers that clown from the Trump era. But when he's standing up there and he's making a big jackass of himself, does he see himself as the vanguard protecting the country? Does he see himself as just the guy who understands this is my moment to try to increase my brand and better my career? What's going through that guy's mind?
Sadly, Jesse, I think it is the former. He really is just that full of himself. I mean, this is the same guy who went to, I believe, the Clarendon, Virginia Barnes & Noble and stood there with a stack of books and said, I was holding a book signing with no one behind him in, the picture. So, I mean, that's the kind of guy that we're dealing with here. Or who take picture, everyone knows that picture of appearing on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert where it's a picture of Jim looking at himself in the mirror in the dressing room. Or I think it was Variety or one of these other entertainment magazines. It was him sitting on a park bench in New York City just staring off into the distance, like purely, just in awe of himself. I mean, so I think, this is the kind of guy who really is that full of himself, really thinks that highly of himself. I read his book. I might have been the only person in America other than maybe his parents who read this book. And it was just the complete, tour de force of narcissism. It was, really, he's the head of the Legion of Dumb. It was just filled with petty anecdotes. Everything that he accuses Donald Trump of, he's been guilty of himself.